The gunshot that split the evening air was the first warning that Scarlett Lawrence wasn't alone anymore. She clutched her worn leather satchel tighter to her chest and urged her exhausted mare deeper into the grove of cottonwoods, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The year was 1871, and the Arizona Territory was as unforgiving as it was vast, a perfect place to disappear, or so she had thought. Scarlett had been running for 3 weeks now, ever since she'd fled Santa Fe with nothing but the clothes on her back, her mother's silver locket, and enough evidence to hang Vernon Blackburn, the most powerful man in the New Mexico Territory. The same man who had murdered her father when he discovered Blackburn's scheme to swindle hundreds of honest settlers out of their land claims. As her horse stumbled over the rocky terrain, Scarlett heard hoofbeats in the distance. They were gaining on her. She'd been so careful, covering her tracks, traveling at night, avoiding towns. But it hadn't been enough. The dying light of the sun cast long shadows across the rugged landscape as she spotted a small homestead nestled against the base of a red rock ridge. Smoke curled from the chimney of a modest cabin, and a corral housed several horses. It was a risk, but she had no choice. Her mare was at the end of her strength, and so was she. Scarlett guided her horse toward the property, scanning the horizon nervously. The hoofbeats behind her had faded, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they picked up her trail again. As she approached, a tall figure emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. "That's far enough, miss," the man called out, his voice carrying across the yard. He stood with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to use the weapon in his hands. "State your business, please," Scarlett said, her voice cracking from thirst and exhaustion. "I need help." The man stepped forward, and she could see him more clearly now. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck beneath a well-worn hat. He wasn't dressed like a typical ranch hand. His clothes were of good quality despite being trail-worn, and something about the way he held himself spoke of education and breeding. "Isaac Owens," he said, lowering his rifle slightly but keeping it ready. "This is my ranch." "Scarlett Lawrence," she replied, swaying in the saddle. "I'm being pursued, men who want to kill me. I just need somewhere to rest for a night before I move on." Isaac's eyes narrowed as he assessed her. She knew what he saw: a young woman of 22 with auburn hair falling from what had once been a neat bun, clothes dusty and torn from hard travel, and eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "What kind of trouble are you in, Miss Lawrence?" he asked, his tone softening slightly as he noted her condition. Before she could answer, the sound of distant hoofbeats returned. Scarlett's head whipped around, panic flooding her veins. "They've found me," she whispered, terror making her voice thin. Something in her fear must have convinced him, because Isaac quickly strode forward and took her horse's reins. "Come with me," he said, leading her toward the barn rather than the house. "Quickly now." Inside the spacious barn, he helped her dismount, catching her when her legs nearly gave way beneath her. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I haven't slept properly in days." "Save your explanations," he said, guiding her toward a ladder leading to a hayloft. "Up there. I'll take care of your horse and deal with our visitors." Scarlett climbed the ladder with trembling limbs, collapsing into the sweet-smelling hay as Isaac quickly unsaddled her mare and led the exhausted animal into an empty stall. He covered all traces of her arrival, scattering hay over the hoofprints in the barn floor. "Stay silent, no matter what you hear," he instructed before disappearing outside. Scarlett crawled to the small loft window and peered out. 3 riders had arrived at the edge of the property, hard-looking men with dust-covered clothes and expressions that spoke of violence. She recognized the leader immediately: Silas Burrows, Blackburn's most trusted enforcer. Isaac walked out to meet them, rifle held casually in the crook of his arm, but Scarlett could see the tension in his stance. "Evening, gentlemen," he called. "Something I can help you with?" Burrows urged his horse forward. "Looking for a woman, young, auburn hair, riding a bay mare." "Seen anyone matching that description?" "Can't say that I have," Isaac replied evenly. "Not many travelers come this way. I'm well off the main trail." Burrows' eyes narrowed. Mind if we look around? She's a thief, stole something valuable from my employer. I mind very much, Isaac said, his posture shifting subtly. The rifle wasn't aimed at the men, but it wasn't far from it either. This is private property. I've been working since sunup and I'm not in the mood for uninvited guests. If I see your runaway, I'll be sure to send word to the sheriff in Tucson. One of Burroughs' companions leaned forward in his saddle. We could just take a quick look in your barn and be on our way. You could try, Isaac replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone, but I don't recommend it. The tension stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Scarlett held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they would hear it even from a distance. Finally, Burroughs straightened in his saddle. We'll be back, he said, the threat unmistakable in his voice. And if we find out you're harboring her, you'll regret it. I'll keep that in mind, Isaac said dryly. Safe travels. He stood unmoving, watching as the three men wheeled their horses around and rode away. Only when they were well out of sight did he return to the barn, climbing the ladder to the loft where Scarlett waited. She sat huddled in the hay, arms wrapped around her knees, trembling with reaction and relief. They're gone for now, Isaac said, settling on a hay bale opposite her. But they'll be back. Those men weren't ordinary bounty hunters, Scarlett nodded. No, they're not. So, he said, fixing her with a steady gaze, I think it's time you told me exactly what kind of trouble you've brought to my doorstep, Miss Lawrence. Scarlett took a deep breath. They work for Vernon Blackburn. He's a land speculator in the New Mexico territory and a murderer. Her voice caught. He killed my father. Isaac's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. And you're running because I have proof. She patted the satchel beside her. Ledgers, contracts, letters, evidence of how he's been swindling honest settlers, bribing territorial officials, and worse. My father discovered what he was doing and confronted him. They called it an accident, said he fell from his horse during a storm. Her voice hardened, but it was no accident. And now Blackburn wants those documents. And me dead, Scarlett added bluntly. I was his ward after my father died. He was my father's business partner. He didn't know that father had told me about his suspicions or that I'd found the evidence. I played the grieving daughter for months while collecting everything I needed. Then I ran. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. Where were you headed? Denver. There's a federal marshal there, an old friend of my father's. I was hoping he could help. That's still a long journey from here, Isaac noted, and those men won't give up easily. I know, Scarlett whispered. I'm sorry to involve you in this. I can leave at first light. No, Isaac interrupted, surprising her. Those men will be watching the trails. You'd never make it. He stood, brushing hay from his clothes. You'll stay here tonight. We'll figure out our next move in the morning. Why are you helping me? Scarlett asked, genuinely confused. You don't know me. Isaac paused at the edge of the loft. Let's just say I recognize the look of someone running from an injustice, he replied cryptically. Come to the house when you're ready. You look like you could use a hot meal and a proper rest. He descended the ladder, leaving Scarlett to wonder what kind of man would risk himself for a stranger's trouble. The cabin was small but well built, with solid furniture that spoke of craftsmanship rather than frontier necessity. Isaac moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, stirring a pot of stew that had been simmering over the fire. It's not fancy, he said, placing a steaming bowl before her at the rough-hewn table, but it's filling. Scarlett ate hungrily, the first real food she'd had in days. As her immediate hunger abated, she became aware of her surroundings in more detail. Bookshelves lined one wall, unusual for a frontier cabin filled with volumes on everything from law to agriculture. A desk in the corner held neatly stacked papers and a well-maintained inkwell. You're not just a rancher, she observed. Isaac glanced up from his own meal. I was a lawyer back in Boston, came west after the war. The war changed many things, Scarlett said softly. Indeed it did, he agreed, a shadow passing over his face. Finish your stew. You can take my bed tonight, I'll sleep out here. I couldn't possibly, you can and will, he cut her off. You look ready to collapse where you sit. Besides, I've slept in worse places than my own hearth. Too exhausted to argue, Scarlett finished her meal and followed his directions to the bedroom. It was simple but comfortable, with a quilt-covered bed that looked like heaven to her tired body. As she sank onto it, she realized she hadn't felt safe in weeks. She was asleep before her head fully touched the pillow. Dawn broke with the distant howl of coyotes. Scarlett woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She rose quickly, straightening her rumpled clothes as best she could and splashing water on her face from the basin Isaac had left for her. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found him already awake, brewing coffee on the stove. "You look better," he observed, handing her a steaming cup. "Thank you," she said, accepting it gratefully, "for everything." Isaac leaned against the counter, watching her with those storm-gray eyes. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "Those men Blackburn's men, they'll keep searching. This territory isn't that big, not when you have the resources to cover it thoroughly." "I know," Scarlett said quietly. "That's why I should leave today. I've put you at risk enough already." "You wouldn't make it 10 miles, Isaac said bluntly. "Not alone. What choice do I have?" She asked, frustration edging her voice. Isaac took a slow sip of his coffee. "I could take you to Denver," Scarlett stared at him. "What?" "I said I could take you to Denver," he repeated calmly. "I know the trails, the safe places to stop. We'd have a better chance together than you would alone." "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Isaac set down his cup. "Let's just say I have my own history with men like Blackburn, men who use power to crush others." His jaw tightened. "Besides, I was planning a trip to Denver anyway." Scarlett knew he was lying about the trip, but the resolve in his face was unmistakable. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Isaac moved swiftly to the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains. "4 riders," he said grimly. "Different men than yesterday, but they have the same look about them." He turned to Scarlett. "Take your things and go out the back. There's a cellar door hidden beneath the woodpile. Get inside and stay quiet." "What about you?" she asked, already gathering her precious satchel. "I'll handle them," he said, checking his revolver before tucking it into his holster. "Go, now." Scarlett slipped out the back door as Isaac went to meet the riders. She located the cellar door beneath the carefully arranged woodpile and descended into the cool darkness below, pulling the door shut above her. The earthen cellar was small but well stocked with preserves and supplies. A tiny window at ground level allowed her to see a slice of the yard. She could hear the muffled sound of voices. Isaac's calm tone contrasted with the more aggressive tones of the visitors. Inching closer to the window, she strained to hear the conversation. "Just passing through," one of the men was saying, "but we heard you might have had other visitors yesterday." "Men looking for a young woman. News travels fast," Isaac replied dryly. "It does when there's $500 for information leading to her capture," another voice said. "That's a lot of money for just pointing a finger, friend." "It certainly is," Isaac agreed. "If I knew anything worth pointing a finger at." There was a pause, and Scarlett could feel the tension even from her hiding place. "Mind if we look around?" The question wasn't really a request. "Actually, I do mind," Isaac's voice hardened. "As I told your friends yesterday, this is private property." "We're not asking," the first voice said. Scarlett heard the unmistakable sound of guns being drawn. Her heart leaped into her throat. 4 against 1, the man continued. "Poor odds for you, mister." "I only need 1 bullet for each of you," Isaac replied, his voice deadly calm. "And I rarely miss. Now I suggest you turn around and ride out the same way you came in." The silence that followed was excruciating. Scarlett held her breath, her fingers white-knuckled around her satchel. Finally, one of the men spoke. "We'll be watching this place. She can't hide forever." "That's your prerogative," Isaac said, "but step foot on my land again without an invitation and you'll get a welcome you won't enjoy." The sound of horses moving away came as a relief so profound that Scarlett sagged against the cellar wall. Moments later, the cellar door opened and Isaac's face appeared above her. "They're gone," he said, offering a hand to help her up. "But they'll be watching the roads. We need to move quickly while they're regrouping." Back in the cabin, Isaac was already packing supplies. "We'll leave at nightfall," he explained, stuffing provisions into saddlebags. "I know a way through the hills that they won't expect us to take. It's longer but safer." "Isaac," Scarlett said, stopping him with a hand on his arm. "You've done enough. I can't ask you to give up your home, your life here to help me. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. You didn't ask, I offered. A wry smile crossed his face. Besides, this place will still be here when I get back, and I've been meaning to see Denver again. He'll find me, Scarlett said, voicing her deepest fear. Blackburn, he has connections everywhere, money, influence. Isaac's expression hardened. Then he'll meet my rifle before he meets you. The simple declaration, spoken with such certainty, sent an unexpected warmth through Scarlett's chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. They spent the day preparing. Isaac showed Scarlett a small hidden compartment beneath the floorboards where he kept emergency supplies and extra ammunition. He gave her a smaller revolver, showing her how to load and fire it. I hope you never need to use this, he said as she practiced aiming at an empty can outside. But if you do, don't hesitate. As the sun began to set, they made final preparations. Isaac had saddled 2 horses, his sturdy buckskin gelding and a smaller, sure-footed mare for Scarlett. We'll travel mostly at night for the first few days, he explained as they secured their supplies. Stay off the main trails. I know a few ranchers and miners along the way who can be trusted to give us shelter when needed. Darkness had fully settled when they finally mounted up. Scarlett took one last look at the small cabin that had provided her first safe haven in weeks. Thank you, she said quietly. Isaac nodded, understanding she meant more than just the immediate help. Stay close, he instructed, turning his horse toward a narrow trail that led up into the hills behind the property. The path gets tricky in places. They rode in silence, the only sounds the occasional call of a night bird and the soft thud of hooves on the packed earth. The moon provided just enough light to see by, casting the landscape in silver and shadow. After an hour of steady climbing, Isaac reined in his horse and gestured for Scarlett to come alongside him. Below them stretched a panoramic view of the valley, and in the distance, Scarlett could make out a cluster of tiny lights, campfires. Blackburn's men, Isaac said grimly. They've set up watch points on all the main trails out of the area, but they won't expect us to go this way. He pointed toward a dark gap in the ridge line ahead. That pass leads to a high valley. It adds 3 days to our journey, but it will keep us away from their search parties. Scarlett studied the distant fires, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. How many men does he have looking for me? Hard to say, Isaac replied, but a man like Blackburn doesn't spare expense when his reputation or freedom is at stake. He turned to face her. What exactly is in those documents that makes them so valuable? Scarlett hesitated, then slid her satchel from her shoulder. Opening it, she withdrew a leather-bound ledger and handed it to him. See for yourself, she said. It's all their records of bribes to territorial officials, fraudulent land claims, threats against honest settlers who wouldn't sell, and worse. Her voice dropped. There's a letter on page 43 in Blackburn's own hand, instructions to Sela's burrows about dealing with my father. Isaac opened the ledger, angling it to catch the moonlight. His expression grew darker as he read. When he reached the page she'd mentioned, his jaw tightened visibly. This is. He began, then stopped, closing the ledger carefully. This is enough to hang him. Now you understand why he wants me dead, Scarlett said quietly. Isaac handed the ledger back to her, his eyes hard in the moonlight. And why we need to get you safely to Denver. He turned his horse back toward the trail. Come on, we should reach the pass before dawn. They continued their ascent, the trail growing steeper and more treacherous. Several times they had to dismount and lead the horses around particularly difficult sections. Scarlett, despite her exhaustion, kept pace without complaint. You ride well, Isaac observed during a brief rest. Not what I'd expect from a banker's daughter, Scarlett smiled faintly. My father believed women should be as capable as men. He taught me to ride, shoot, and manage accounts, much to the dismay of Santa Fe society. Her smile faded. After my mother died, it was just the 2 of us. He was everything to me. He sounds like a good man, Isaac said. He was, Scarlett replied softly. The best. She looked at Isaac curiously. What about your family? You mentioned Boston. A shadow passed over his face. My father was a judge, very respected, very proper. He had my life planned from the moment I was born. Harvard, law practice, suitable marriage, eventual judgeship. Isaac's mouth twisted. I followed the script until the war came, then everything changed. You fought, Scarlett asked. Isaac nodded. Union cavalry. By the time I came home in '65, I couldn't go back to that life. My father called me ungrateful when I decided to come west. He shrugged. Maybe I was, but I needed open sky more than I needed Boston society. And now, Scarlett asked, are you happy here? Most days, he replied with a slight smile, though I could do without unexpected visitors bringing trouble to my door. Despite the gravity of their situation, Scarlett found herself returning his smile. I'll try to be less trouble. I doubt that's possible, Isaac said, but there was warmth in his voice as he stood to help her back onto her horse. They reached the pass just as the eastern sky began to lighten. The gap between the towering rock formations was narrow but passable, opening into a high meadow cupped within the surrounding peaks. We'll rest here for a few hours, Isaac decided, leading them to a small copse of trees near a spring. The horses need it, and so do we. They made a cold camp, not risking a fire that might be seen. Scarlett nearly fell asleep while eating the jerky and biscuits Isaac provided. Sleep, he told her gently. I'll keep watch. Scarlett wanted to protest, but exhaustion won out. She used her saddle as a pillow and was asleep within moments. She woke to the touch of a hand on her shoulder. Isaac knelt beside her, finger to his lips in warning. The sun was high overhead. She had slept for hours. Riders, he whispered, coming up the trail behind us. Fear jolted through her. How did they find us? Someone must have seen us leave, Isaac said grimly, helping her to her feet. We need to move, now. They saddled the horses with urgent efficiency. As they worked, the distant sound of voices echoed up from the pass. They're getting closer, Scarlett said, her hands shaking as she tightened her saddle girth. There's another way out of this valley, Isaac told her, checking his rifle. A game trail over the northern ridge. It's barely passable, but it's our best chance. He hesitated, then added, if we get separated, keep heading north until you reach Pine Creek. There's a trading post there run by a man named Marshall. Tell him I sent you, he'll help. We won't get separated, Scarlett insisted, mounting her horse. Isaac's expression was grim as he swung into his saddle. Let's hope not. Stay close and keep your revolver ready. They rode hard across the meadow toward the northern ridge, keeping to the tree line as much as possible. Behind them, the voices grew louder as Blackburn's men emerged from the pass. A shout went up. They'd been spotted. Ride, Isaac commanded, spurring his horse forward. Scarlett followed, bent low over her mare's neck as they raced for the narrow trail Isaac had mentioned. The sound of pursuit was close behind them. A shot rang out, the bullet whistling past Scarlett's ear. She fought the urge to look back, focusing instead on following Isaac up the increasingly steep trail. The path narrowed dramatically as it wound up the ridge face, barely wide enough for a horse in some places. Isaac led them confidently, choosing each turn with practiced ease despite the danger pressing behind them. Another shot cracked through the air. Isaac's horse stumbled, regained its footing, then lurched sideways. Blood appeared on its shoulder. Isaac, Scarlett cried in alarm, keep going. He shouted back, controlling his wounded mount with expert hands. Don't stop. The trail curved sharply around a massive boulder. As they rounded it, Isaac suddenly reined in his horse and dismounted, rifle in hand. What are you doing? Scarlett asked frantically. Creating a bottleneck, he said, taking position behind the boulder. They'll have to come around one at a time. Go on ahead, I'll catch up. I'm not leaving you, Scarlett insisted, sliding from her saddle. Isaac looked like he wanted to argue, but there was no time. The first of their pursuers was approaching the bend. Isaac raised his rifle, waiting until the rider came into view before firing. The man fell from his horse with a cry, tumbling down the steep slope. One down, Isaac muttered, working the lever action to chamber another round. Scarlett drew her revolver, steadying it with both hands as she'd been taught. When the second rider appeared, she fired. Her shot went wide, but it was enough to make the man duck and lose control of his horse on the narrow trail. Horse and rider went over the edge with a terrifying scream that echoed across the valley. Good shot, Isaac said, sparing her a quick glance of approval. Two more riders approached more cautiously, having heard the fate of their companions. One fired blindly around the boulder, forcing Isaac and Scarlett to take cover. We need to move, Isaac said, checking his wounded horse. The animal was trembling, blood still flowing from its shoulder. He won't make it much further, we'll have to double up on your mare. A bullet struck the rock face above them, sending chips of stone flying. Scarlett flinched as one cut her cheek. Cover me, Isaac told her, reaching for his saddlebags. Scarlett leaned around the boulder and fired twice, forcing their pursuers to retreat momentarily. Isaac quickly transferred essential supplies to her mare's saddlebags, then removed his saddle from his wounded horse. Good boy, he murmured to the animal, giving it a final pat before slapping its rump to send it back down the trail. The horse's retreat would further block their pursuers. Let's go, he said, helping Scarlett back onto her mare before mounting behind her. The horse protested briefly at the double weight but responded to Isaac's firm handling. They continued up the trail, moving more slowly but steadily putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. The path grew even narrower as it approached the ridge top, in places barely clinging to the mountainside. Almost there, Isaac encouraged as they rounded yet another bend. Ahead, the trail disappeared into a dense stand of pine trees that crowned the ridge. Just as Scarlett began to think they might escape, disaster struck. A section of trail beneath them crumbled away, sending their horse scrambling for purchase. Isaac reacted instantly, throwing himself and Scarlett from the saddle as the horse lost its footing. They landed hard on the remaining section of trail, watching in horror as the mare slid over the edge with a terrified whinny. The sound of her body tumbling down the steep slope made Scarlett's stomach lurch. No, she whispered, staring at the place where the horse had disappeared. Are you hurt? Isaac asked urgently, checking her for injuries. Scarlett shook her head, too shocked to speak. All their supplies, her precious satchel with the evidence against Blackburn, all gone. We need to keep moving, Isaac said, helping her to her feet. We can make it on foot from here. But the documents, your life is worth more than papers, Isaac said firmly. Come on. They continued up the trail on foot, moving as quickly as they dared on the treacherous path. Behind them, they could hear their pursuers encountering the same collapsed section of trail, shouts of alarm rising up. The pine forest at the ridge top offered welcome cover. They pushed through the dense trees, the ground leveling out as they reached the summit. On the far side, the land descended more gently into another valley. We'll head for Pine Creek, Isaac decided, leading them northward through the trees. It's about 30 miles from here, 2 days' hard walk, maybe less. What about water, food? Scarlett asked, the reality of their situation sinking in. Isaac patted his pockets. I always keep jerky with me, and I know where to find water along the way. He gave her a reassuring look. It won't be comfortable, but we'll make it. They walked until nightfall, following game trails through the forest. Isaac moved with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with wilderness survival, pointing out edible berries and finding a small spring where they could drink. As darkness made further travel dangerous, they made camp in a small hollow beneath the spreading branches of a massive pine. Without blankets or a fire, the night promised to be cold. Here, Isaac said, removing his coat and draping it over Scarlett's shoulders. What about you? She protested. I've endured worse, he said simply, settling beside her. After a moment's hesitation, he added, we'll stay warmer if we stay close. Scarlett moved closer, allowing him to wrap an arm around her shoulders. His solid presence was reassuring in the darkness. I'm sorry, she said softly. About your horse, your home, everything you've lost because of me. I haven't lost anything that can't be replaced, Isaac replied, except perhaps my pride at being outmaneuvered by Blackburn's men. How did they find us? Scarlett wondered. My guess is they had men watching more widely than I anticipated. Someone must have seen us heading into the hills. He was quiet for a moment. What will you do when we reach Denver, after you deliver your evidence? Scarlett sighed. I haven't thought that far ahead. My only focus has been staying alive long enough to see Blackburn brought to justice. She looked up at the stars visible through the pine branches. I have a small inheritance from my mother, enough to start somewhere new, I suppose. You could go back east, Isaac suggested. Boston, New York, safer places for a young woman alone. Is that what you think I should do? Find a safe corner and hide away, even in the darkness? She could sense his smile. No, that doesn't seem like you at all. What about you? She asked. Will you go back to your ranch? Eventually, he said, though I might need to be more selective about taking in strays. Despite their situation, Scarlett found herself smiling. I'm not a stray. No, Isaac agreed, his voice softening. You're certainly not that. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the occasional call of a night bird or rustle of wind through the pines. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. Scarlett woke before dawn, momentarily disoriented until she felt the steady rise and fall of Isaac's chest beneath her cheek. Sometime during the night, she had curled against him, seeking warmth. His arm was still around her, holding her securely even in sleep. She remained still, reluctant to move away from his warmth in the pre-dawn chill. There was something comforting about his presence that went beyond the physical protection he offered. In the few days she had known him, Isaac Owens had shown more integrity and courage than most men she had met in her entire life. His breathing changed, and she knew he was awake. Neither of them moved immediately. We should get moving, he finally said, his voice rough with sleep. Cover as much ground as possible before it gets hot. Reluctantly, Scarlett sat up, immediately missing his warmth. How far to Pine Creek? If we keep a good pace, we might make it by nightfall tomorrow, Isaac replied, rising to his feet and helping her up. They set off as the first rays of sun filtered through the trees, heading north through terrain that grew increasingly rugged. Isaac set a brisk pace, stopping only briefly to drink from streams they crossed. By midday, the forest had thinned, giving way to rocky slopes scattered with hardy brush and twisted juniper trees. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Scarlett's throat was parched despite their water stops. There's a shepherd's hut about 2 miles ahead, Isaac told her as they paused in the shade of an overhanging cliff. Used seasonally by sheep herders, should be empty this time of year but might have some supplies. How do you know this area so well? Scarlett asked, gratefully accepting the handful of berries he offered. I spent my first year out west with a survey team, Isaac explained, mapped most of this territory before settling on my ranch. His expression turned wry. Turns out legal training is useful for marking property boundaries. They reached the shepherd's hut by mid-afternoon, a simple stone structure with a wooden roof that had partially collapsed on one side. Inside, they found an old iron cookpot and, more importantly, a cache of dried beans and salt pork buried beneath the dirt floor. Trail gold, Isaac said with satisfaction, unearthing the supplies. He glanced at the sky through the damaged roof. We should rest here for a few hours, no sense crossing the next valley in the heat. Scarlett sank gratefully onto a rough wooden bench, her feet aching from the unfamiliar exertion. Do you think they're still following us? Possibly, Isaac said, checking the loads in his rifle. But they'll be on foot too after that trail collapse, and they don't know these hills like I do. He set about preparing a small fire in the hut's stone fireplace, using the cookpot to make a simple stew with the beans, salt pork, and some wild onions he'd gathered along the way. The hot food restored Scarlett's strength and spirits. As they ate, Isaac told her more about his time with the survey team and his decision to settle in the territory. I wanted land that was mine, he explained, something built by my own hands, not inherited or granted through family connections. He smiled faintly. My father called it a fool's errand, said I'd come crawling back to Boston within a year. But you didn't, Scarlett observed. No, Isaac agreed. 5 years now, and I haven't regretted it, not even when drought killed half my cattle or when a mountain lion took up residence in my barn. He glanced at her. Not even when mysterious young women appear with trouble on their heels. Scarlett flushed. When this is over, I'll find a way to repay you. There's no debt between us, Isaac said firmly. I made my choice to help you, I stand by it. Before Scarlett could respond, a sound outside the hut made them both freeze, the unmistakable crunch of a boot on gravel. Isaac moved silently to the window, peering carefully around the edge of the wooden shutter. His expression hardened. 2 of them, he whispered, coming this way. Scarlett's heart began to pound. How did they find us? Luck, maybe, or they know about the hut too. Isaac checked his rifle again. Back door, now. They slipped out through the hut's rear entrance just as the front door crashed open. Crouching low, they moved among the scattered boulders behind the structure, working their way up the slope. A shout indicated they'd been spotted. A bullet whined off a rock near Scarlett's head, showering her with stone fragments. "Run," Isaac urged, pushing her ahead of him. "Over the ridge." They scrambled upward, using the rocky terrain for cover as bullets struck around them. At the top of the ridge, Isaac paused long enough to fire back, forcing their pursuers to take cover. The far side of the ridge dropped away more steeply. They half ran, half slid down the loose scree, raising a cloud of dust that temporarily obscured them from view. "This way," Isaac directed, pulling Scarlett toward a narrow ravine that cut through the hillside. They raced along the ravine floor, its twisting path offering some protection from gunfire. The sound of pursuit grew more distant as they put the ridge between themselves and Blackburn's men. The ravine eventually opened into a broader valley, offering no cover except scattered sage brush. They kept running, lungs burning and legs aching until they reached a stand of cottonwoods along a dry creek bed. "Did we lose them?" Scarlett gasped, collapsing against a tree trunk. Isaac peered back the way they had come. "For now, but they'll pick up our trail eventually." He looked up at the sun, now low in the western sky. "We need to keep moving. We can reach Pine Creek by mid-morning if we travel through the night." "Through the night," Scarlett repeated, looking at the darkening landscape with apprehension. "It's our best chance," Isaac insisted. "The moon is nearly full enough light to travel by, and they won't expect us to keep going in the dark." Exhausted but determined, Scarlett nodded. "Lead on." The night journey was difficult. Without a trail to follow, they navigated by stars and Isaac's memory of the terrain. Several times they were forced to backtrack when they encountered impassable gullies or cliffs. Scarlett stumbled frequently, her exhaustion making every step an effort of will. Isaac stayed close, offering his arm for support when the ground grew treacherous. "Tell me about Boston," she said during one of their brief rest stops, desperate for distraction from her fatigue and fear. "What was it like growing up there?" Isaac seemed surprised by the question but answered readily enough. "Orderly, proper. Every hour of my day planned from morning lessons to evening prayers." He smiled slightly in the moonlight. "I used to escape to the docks whenever I could, watch the ships coming in from all over the world, dream of seeing those places." "And did you see those places?" "Some," he said. "The war took me through much of the South. After that I came west, never did make it to China or Africa, though." He glanced at her. "What about you? Santa Fe isn't exactly a small frontier town." "It wasn't always our home," Scarlett replied. "We lived in St. Louis until I was 12. My father was in banking there. After my mother died, he decided we needed a fresh start." She smiled at the memory. "I was terrified at first. Santa Fe seemed so foreign, so different, but I grew to love it." "And now?" Isaac asked quietly. Scarlett was silent for a moment. "Now I don't know where home is." Isaac's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. "You'll find it again," he said with surprising certainty. They continued through the night, each step bringing them closer to Pine Creek and the hope of safety. As dawn broke, Isaac pointed to a distant line of darker green against the golden landscape. "There," he said. "Those trees mark Pine Creek. The trading post is about 3 miles along it, near the ford." Renewed hope gave them energy for the final leg of their journey. They reached the creek by mid-morning, as Isaac had predicted. The sight of flowing water was a welcome one after their long, dry trek. They followed the creek downstream, staying within the cover of the trees that lined its banks. Eventually, the trading post came into view, a substantial log building with a wide porch, surrounded by several smaller outbuildings. A few horses were tethered outside, and smoke rose from the stone chimney. "Let me do the talking," Isaac said as they approached. "Marshall can be prickly with strangers." The trading post's door swung open as they climbed the porch steps. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a silver-streaked beard stood in the doorway, a shotgun held casually in his hands. "That's close enough," he called. Then his eyes narrowed. "Isaac Owens. Is that you under all that trail dust?" Isaac raised a hand in greeting. "Hello, Marshall. We could use some help. Marshall's gaze shifted to Scarlett, taking in her exhausted state and torn clothing. "I can see that," he said dryly. "Come in, both of you, before whoever's chasing you catches up." Inside, the trading post was surprisingly well stocked, with goods ranging from basic supplies to luxury items like canned peaches and French brandies. A pot-bellied stove radiated welcome heat in the center of the main room. Marshall poured them both cups of strong coffee, then leaned against his counter, waiting for an explanation. Isaac gave him a shortened version of their situation, omitting specific details about the evidence against Blackburn. "Vernon Blackburn," Marshall mused when Isaac finished. "I've heard of him, bad business that." He studied Scarlett. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest, young lady." "It wasn't my intention," Scarlett replied, "but I couldn't let my father's murder go unanswered." Marshall nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He turned to Isaac. "What's your plan from here?" "We need to get to Denver," Isaac said. "As quickly and quietly as possible." Marshall stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Stage comes through tomorrow, headed north. Not directly to Denver, but it'll get you to Pueblo. From there, you can catch the Denver-bound stage." "We can't wait that long," Isaac said. "Blackburn's men can't be far behind." "Then you'll need horses," Marshall said, "and I happen to have 2 I can spare." He named a price that made Isaac wince, but he didn't argue. "Can we get supplies as well?" Isaac asked. "We lost everything except what I had in my pockets." Marshall gestured to his shelves. "Take what you need, add it to your bill." While Isaac selected supplies, Marshall led Scarlett to a small back room where she could wash and change into clean clothes, a simple shirt and trousers from the trader's stock. "They'll be big, but better than what you're wearing," he told her gruffly. The feeling of clean water on her skin and fresh clothes, even ill-fitting ones, did wonders for Scarlett's spirits. When she emerged, Marshall handed her a wide-brimmed hat. "Keep your hair tucked up," he advised. "From a distance, you'll pass for a young man. Might buy you some time if Blackburn's men come asking questions." Isaac had finished gathering supplies, basic provisions, ammunition for his rifle, and a new saddlebag to replace the ones they'd lost. Marshall brought out a map, spreading it on the counter. "Here's the fastest route to Denver," he said, tracing a line with his finger. "Stay on this trail until you reach the Thompson River. Follow it northeast to the plains. Once you're on the plains, it's a straight shot to Denver." He tapped the map emphatically. "But beware this stretch here. Apache country, they've been restless lately." Isaac studied the route, committing it to memory. "How long?" 4 days hard riding, Marshall estimated, "if you don't run into trouble." "We're obliged to you, Marshall," Isaac said, extending his hand. The trader shook it firmly. "Just don't make me regret helping you. Blackburn isn't a man to cross lightly." He glanced at Scarlett. "Though it seems someone needed to." They left the trading post an hour later, mounted on fresh horses and equipped with enough supplies to reach Denver. Marshall's final advice had been to avoid settlements and stay off the main trails where possible. "We've lost the evidence," Scarlett said as they rode north, the trading post disappearing behind them. "Even if we reach Denver, it's my word against Blackburn's now." "Not quite," Isaac replied. "I memorized key details from those ledgers, names, dates, amounts, enough to point investigators in the right direction, and your testimony still matters." Scarlett looked at him in surprise. "You memorized the ledgers? When?" "That night at my cabin," Isaac said. "I have a good head for numbers." "Always have." He smiled slightly. "Another disappointment to my father. He thought I should use that talent for business rather than wasting it on legal matters." "You continue to surprise me, Mr. Owens," Scarlett said, returning his smile. "As do you, Miss Lawrence," he replied, his eyes warm as they met hers. They rode steadily northward, the landscape gradually changing from the rugged, forested hills to more open country. By nightfall, they had covered significant distance without any sign of pursuit. They made camp in a sheltered hollow beside a small stream, risking a tiny fire to cook a hot meal. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead with unmatched brilliance. Wrapped in the blankets Marshall had provided, they sat close to the fire, its warmth welcome after the long day's ride. "Tell me about your father," Isaac said suddenly. "The man, not the victim." Scarlett was surprised by the request, but found herself smiling at the memories. He was brilliant with numbers, like you, could calculate complex interest in his head, but he was also the sort of banker who would work with farmers during bad years rather than foreclose. She traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. He loved music. Played the violin every evening after dinner, said it kept my mother close since she was the one who taught him. He sounds like a good man, Isaac said. He was, Scarlett agreed. Too good for the world he was in, perhaps, too trusting. She looked up at Isaac. That's why I have to do this. He deserved better than to be murdered and forgotten. Isaac nodded slowly. I understand. He was quiet for a moment, then added, My father and I never saw eye to eye, but he taught me one thing I've never forgotten, that justice matters, that without it, we're no better than the animals. Is that why you became a lawyer? Scarlett asked. Partly, Isaac admitted, though I think I was trying to please him as much as anything else. He poked at the fire with a stick. I haven't practiced law since coming west, but I've never forgotten the principles. Right and wrong don't change just because you've crossed the Mississippi. Scarlett studied him in the firelight, seeing the strength in his features, the integrity in his eyes. No, she said softly, they don't. Their gazes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Isaac cleared his throat and stood up. We should get some rest, he said. Long ride tomorrow, Scarlett nodded, suddenly aware of how her heart had quickened. Good night, Isaac. Good night, Scarlett, he replied, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. The next day brought them to the Thompson River, a broad, swift-flowing waterway that carved its way through the landscape. They followed it northeast as Marshall had instructed, the terrain growing increasingly flat as they approached the plains. Late in the afternoon, as they rounded a bend in the river, Isaac suddenly reined in his horse, signaling for Scarlett to stop. Riders, he said quietly, pointing to a distant dust cloud moving parallel to the river. Can't tell who they are from here, Scarlett's heart sank. Blackburn's men. Possible, Isaac conceded, but they're heading the same way we are, not tracking us, he considered for a moment. We'll move away from the river, take cover in those hills to the east, let them pass. They altered their course, climbing into a range of low, rocky hills that offered good visibility of the surrounding countryside. From their elevated position, they could see the riders more clearly, 5 men moving at a steady pace along the river trail. Not Blackburn's men, Isaac said with relief as he studied them through Scarlett's father's small brass spyglass that he carried. Looks like a hunting party, probably from one of the settlements downriver. They waited until the riders had passed well beyond their position before continuing, now more cautious than before. 2 more days to Denver, Isaac estimated as they made camp that night. If we push hard tomorrow, we might make it in 1. The sooner the better, Scarlett said, nervousness evident in her voice. Despite their successful evasion so far, she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still close behind. Her intuition proved correct the next morning. They had been riding for less than an hour when Isaac spotted another dust cloud, this one moving rapidly from the south, the direction they had come from. Riders, he said grimly, moving fast, could be a patrol from Fort Collins, but it could be Blackburn's men, Scarlett finished. How did they find us again, Marshall? Isaac said, his expression hardening. He must have talked, willingly or otherwise. They urged their horses to a gallop, racing across the increasingly open terrain. The plains offered speed, but little cover, only occasional stands of cottonwoods along the winding creeks that fed into the Thompson River. The dust cloud behind them grew larger, confirming Isaac's fears they were being pursued, and their hunters were gaining. There. Scarlett pointed ahead to where the land rose slightly, forming a rocky outcropping that broke the flat expanse of the plains. Could we make a stand there? Isaac assessed the formation with a quick glance. It's our best option. They have us outnumbered, but high ground gives us an advantage. They pushed their tiring horses toward the outcropping, reaching it just as their pursuers came close enough to be identified. 6 riders, all armed, unmistakably Blackburn's men by the way they rode and the determined line of their approach. Leave the horses here, Isaac directed as they reached the rocks. Grab the supplies and ammunition. We'll climb higher. They scrambled up the rocky slope, finding a natural depression near the top that offered both cover and a clear field of fire. Isaac positioned himself at the edge, rifle ready. "Stay down," he told Scarlett, handing her the revolver. "Don't shoot unless you have a clear target." The riders circled the base of the outcropping, clearly aware that their quarry had gone to ground. After a brief consultation, they split up, 3 remaining with the horses while the others began to work their way up different sides of the formation. Isaac waited patiently, tracking the nearest climber through his rifle sights. When the man exposed himself crossing between boulders, Isaac fired. The sharp crack of the rifle was followed by a cry of pain. The man tumbled back down the slope, clutching his shoulder. "One wounded," Isaac murmured, working the lever to chamber another round, "but they know our position now." A fusillade of gunfire erupted from below, bullets whining off the rocks around them. Scarlett pressed herself flatter against the ground, heart pounding in her ears. The exchange of fire continued for several minutes, with neither side gaining advantage. Then one of Blackburn's men managed to work his way up the far side of the outcropping, appearing suddenly on their flank. "Isaac!" Scarlett cried in warning, raising her revolver. Isaac whirled, firing from the hip. His shot went wide, but it forced the attacker to dive for cover. Scarlett fired twice, her bullets striking the rock near the man's head, showering him with stone fragments. The man retreated, but not before throwing something toward their position, a stick of dynamite, its fuse sputtering. Isaac lunged for it, grabbing the explosive and hurling it back down the slope in one fluid motion. The resulting explosion sent a cloud of dust and rock fragments into the air, accompanied by cries of alarm from below. "That'll make them think twice," Isaac said grimly, returning to his position. But their situation was deteriorating. The gunmen below had them pinned down, and it was only a matter of time before they worked out another approach. Worse, the sun was beginning to set. In darkness, their advantage of high ground would diminish. "We need to move," Isaac decided. "There's a ravine on the far side. If we can reach it, we might be able to slip away while they're still focused on this position." They gathered their meager supplies, waiting for a lull in the firing before making their move. Keeping low, they worked their way across the top of the outcropping toward the ravine Isaac had spotted. They were halfway there when a shout indicated they'd been seen. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels as they ran, diving into the shelter of the ravine just as a volley whizzed overhead. The ravine cut deeply into the plains beyond the outcropping, providing cover as they made their way swiftly along its floor. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew more distant as darkness fell, making it difficult for Blackburn's men to track them. They continued through the night, following the ravine until it widened into a shallow valley. By dawn, they were exhausted but had put significant distance between themselves and their pursuers. "We lost the horses," Scarlett said as they paused to rest beside a small spring. "How far are we from Denver now?" Isaac surveyed the landscape. 20 miles, maybe more. We can make it on foot in 2 days." He looked at her with concern. "Are you up for it?" Scarlett straightened, determination in every line of her body. "I've come this far, I won't stop now." Isaac smiled, admiration clear in his eyes. "Then let's keep moving. The sooner we reach Denver, the sooner this will be over." They walked through the day, rationing their remaining food and water carefully. The plains stretched endlessly before them, broken only by occasional creeks and isolated stands of trees. By late afternoon, they could see the distant smudge on the horizon that indicated civilization, Denver. "We'll reach the outskirts by tomorrow afternoon," Isaac estimated as they made camp for the night in a small grove of trees. "From there, we can find transportation into the city." Scarlett nodded, too tired for conversation. The days of constant travel and tension had taken their toll. As she settled onto her blanket, she found herself wondering what would happen once they reached Denver. Would the marshal believe her without the documentary evidence? And after that, what then? She glanced at Isaac, who was checking their surroundings one final time before settling down for the night. In the short time she had known him, he had become more important to her than she could have imagined. The thought of parting once their journey was complete left her with an unexpected ache. As if sensing her thoughts, Isaac turned to meet her gaze. "Try to rest," he said gently. "We're almost there." Scarlett nodded, closing her eyes. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive, her mind too full of what lay ahead and what might be left behind. They set out at first light, pushing themselves despite aching muscles and blistered feet. The distant smudge on the horizon gradually resolved into the distinct outline of buildings Denver, growing larger with each mile they covered. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the outlying farms and homesteads that surrounded the city. Isaac approached a farmer working his fields, explaining that they had lost their horses and needed transportation into Denver. The man, impressed by Isaac's honest manner, offered them a ride on his wagon when he took his produce to market the following morning. "We'll take it," Isaac decided, thanking the farmer. "One more night won't make a difference now." They spent the night in the farmer's barn, grateful for the relative comfort and safety after their ordeal. The farmer's wife, a kind-hearted woman named Martha, insisted on feeding them a hot meal and providing clean water for washing. As they sat on a bench outside the barn after dinner, watching the sun set over the distant mountains, Scarlett found herself reluctant to break the companionable silence between them. Finally, she spoke the question that had been on her mind. "What will you do?" "After we reach Denver and meet with the marshal," Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I should go back to my ranch, rebuild what was lost." He glanced at her. "What about you?" Scarlett sighed. "I don't know. I can't go back to Santa Fe even if Blackburn is brought to justice. Too many memories." She gazed toward the mountains. "I always wanted to see California. Perhaps I'll go west." "California is a long way," Isaac observed. "Dangerous journey for a woman alone." "I've survived this far," Scarlett pointed out with a small smile. Isaac nodded, acknowledging the truth of her statement. "Yes, you have." He hesitated, then added, "You could come back with me to the ranch." Scarlett looked at him in surprise. "What? It's not much," he continued, a hint of uncertainty in his voice that she had never heard before. "And it needs work after I've been away, but it's peaceful." "Beautiful in its own way." He met her eyes directly. "And I find I'm not eager to say goodbye to you, Scarlett Lawrence." A warmth spread through Scarlett's chest at his words. "Are you offering me employment, Mr. Owens?" she asked, her voice light despite the sudden racing of her heart. Isaac smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "I'm offering you whatever you want it to be," he said simply. "Shelter, partnership, more." The last word hung between them, full of possibility. Scarlett found herself unable to look away from his steady gaze. "I think," she said softly, "that I would like to see your ranch when this is over." Isaac's smile deepened, reaching his eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned closer. His kiss was gentle, questioning, and Scarlett answered by moving closer, her hand finding his. When they parted, Isaac touched her cheek lightly. "Then we have a plan," he said. The wagon ride into Denver the next morning seemed to pass in no time, the city growing around them as they approached its center. The territorial capital was a bustling place, with brick and wood buildings lining streets crowded with wagons, horses, and pedestrians. The farmer dropped them at the central market, refusing payment for the ride. "Good luck to you both," he said as they thanked him. "Whatever trouble you're in, I hope it turns out right." Isaac led the way through the busy streets toward the federal marshal's office, located in a solid brick building near the courthouse. As they approached, Scarlett felt her nerve faltering. "What if he doesn't believe me?" she whispered. "Without the documents." Isaac took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "He'll believe you, and remember, I memorized key details. It will be enough to start an investigation." The marshal's office was a plain, functional space, with wanted posters covering one wall and a large map of the territory on another. Behind a sturdy desk sat Marshal James Harrington, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Help you?" he asked as they entered. "Marshal Harrington," Scarlett said, stepping forward. "My name is Scarlett Lawrence. I believe you knew my father, Edward Lawrence." Recognition flickered in the marshal's eyes. "Eddie Lawrence's girl," he studied her more carefully. "By God, you have his look about you." His expression sobered. "I was sorry to hear about his passing. Accident, wasn't it?" "No, sir," Scarlett said firmly. "It was murder, ordered by Vernon Blackburn." Marshal Harrington's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation, Miss Lawrence." "She has proof," Isaac interjected. "Or rather, she had it. Documents that were lost during our journey here. Blackburn's men have been hunting us across 3 territories to prevent this information from reaching you. The marshal's gaze shifted to Isaac, assessing him carefully. And you are Isaac Owens, former attorney, now rancher in the Arizona Territory. Isaac met the marshal's gaze steadily. I've seen the evidence myself, sir. It's compelling. Harrington leaned back in his chair. Sit down, both of you. This sounds like a story I need to hear in full. For the next hour, Scarlett recounted everything her father's suspicions about Blackburn's land dealings, his death, her discovery of the incriminating documents, and their harrowing journey to Denver. Isaac added his own observations and recited from memory the key names and figures from the ledgers. When they finished, Marshal Harrington was silent for a long moment, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Blackburn is a powerful man, he said finally, well connected in territorial politics. Going after him won't be easy, especially without those documents. Scarlett's heart sank, but the marshal wasn't finished. However, he continued, I've had my eye on him for some time. There have been rumors, complaints that never quite had enough substance to act on. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. Your testimony, combined with Mr. Owens' recollections of the documents, might be enough to get a federal investigation started. You believe us? Scarlett asked, hope rising within her. Eddie Lawrence was an honest man, Harrington said simply. If he suspected Blackburn of wrongdoing, that carries weight with me, and the fact that Blackburn has gone to such lengths to silence you. He nodded decisively. Yes, Miss Lawrence, I believe you. Relief washed over Scarlett, so intense that she felt momentarily light-headed. Isaac's hand found hers, squeezing gently. What happens now? Isaac asked. Now, the marshal said, standing, we get you both somewhere safe while I wire the federal prosecutor in Santa Fe, and then we start building a case. He gave Scarlett a reassuring look. It won't be quick and it won't be easy, but if what you've told me is true, Vernon Blackburn will face justice for what he's done. He arranged for them to stay at a small hotel not far from his office, under the protection of one of his deputies. For the first time in weeks, Scarlett slept in a real bed, free from the immediate fear of pursuit. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Marshal Harrington had them provide formal statements, which he sent by telegraph to Santa Fe along with a request for a formal investigation. By afternoon, he had received confirmation that the request was being taken seriously. The territorial governor has ordered Blackburn's office and home sealed pending investigation, he informed them when they returned to his office. Several of his associates have already been taken in for questioning. Including Silas Burrows, Scarlett asked. The marshal nodded. Arrested this morning in Trinidad. Apparently, he and his men have been causing quite a disturbance across 3 territories looking for you. What about the men who were pursuing us? Isaac asked. Still at large as far as we know, Harrington admitted. But with Blackburn under scrutiny and Burrows in custody, they've lost their leadership. My guess is they'll scatter rather than continue the hunt. Over the next several days, Scarlett and Isaac remained in Denver, providing additional details as needed for the investigation. Word came that authorities in Santa Fe had uncovered additional evidence in Blackburn's office, not everything that had been in Scarlett's satchel, but enough to corroborate her claims. They found a letter, Marshal Harrington told them a week after their arrival. Hidden in a secret compartment in Blackburn's desk, explicit instructions to Burrows regarding your father. He looked at Scarlett sympathetically. It confirms everything you said. The news brought Scarlett to tears not of sadness but of vindication. Her father's death would not go unpunished. His killer would face justice. As the immediate crisis passed and the legal machinery began its slow grind toward justice, Scarlett and Isaac found themselves with decisions to make. The prosecutor wants me to return to Santa Fe, Scarlett told Isaac as they walked along Denver's busy streets one afternoon, to testify before the grand jury. Isaac nodded, his expression carefully neutral. When would you leave? Next week, she replied, studying his face. They expect the proceedings to last several months. I see, Isaac said. He was silent for a moment, then asked, and after that, have you given any more thought to your plans? Scarlett stopped walking, turning to face him. I have, she said. I still want to see your ranch. If the offer still stands, the smile that broke across Isaac's face was answer enough, but he put it into words anyway. It stands, he said, for as long as you want it to. And if I want it to be permanent, Scarlett asked softly. Isaac took both her hands in his. Then I would be the happiest man in the territories, he said simply. He kissed her then, in the middle of the busy street, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. Scarlett kissed him back, feeling for the first time in months that she had found her path forward. The grand jury proceedings in Santa Fe were as lengthy and complex as predicted. Scarlett spent 3 months providing testimony, identifying documents, and helping prosecutors build their case. Throughout it all, Isaac remained in Denver, handling legal matters related to his ranch and waiting for her return. They exchanged letters weekly, Scarlett's detailed accounts of the proceedings matched by Isaac's descriptions of his plans for the ranch and his impatience for her return. When the grand jury finally returned indictments against Vernon Blackburn and 6 of his associates, including Silas Burrows, for crimes ranging from fraud to murder, Scarlett felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had carried since her father's death. "It's over," she wrote to Isaac. "Or at least my part in it is. The trial won't begin for months, but the prosecutor says my testimony before the grand jury may be sufficient. I can leave Santa Fe at last." His reply came by return post. "The ranch is waiting, as am I." The journey back to Arizona was very different from her flight from New Mexico. This time, Scarlett traveled openly, by stagecoach and then by train as far as the lines extended. For the final leg, Isaac met her in Tucson, his face breaking into a smile when he spotted her among the disembarking passengers. "Welcome home," he said simply, gathering her into his arms. The ranch had been repaired in his absence, the barn rebuilt, the corral expanded, the cabin cleaned and waiting. A small vegetable garden had been started beside the house, and new cattle grazed in the pastures. "It's beautiful," Scarlett said as they rode up to the property, seeing it properly for the first time without fear clouding her vision. "It's not much compared to what you're used to," Isaac said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Scarlett turned to him, her eyes shining. "It's perfect," she said, "because it's yours, and because you're here." He kissed her then in the golden light of the setting sun, with the ranch spread out before them and the future wide open. They were married 2 months later in a simple ceremony at the small church in the nearest town. Marshall Harrington came from Denver to stand as Isaac's best man, and several neighboring ranchers and their families attended, curious about the woman who had captured the reserved rancher's heart. Life on the ranch was not always easy. The work was hard, the weather unpredictable, and the isolation sometimes challenging. But Scarlett found a peace there that she had never known in Santa Fe. She started a school for the children of neighboring ranches, using her education to benefit the community. Isaac expanded the ranch operations, his legal background proving useful in negotiating water rights and grazing agreements. A year after their marriage, word came that Vernon Blackburn had been convicted on all counts and sentenced to hang. Silas Burrows and 3 others received long prison terms. The letter from the prosecutor included a bank draft Scarlett's share of her father's recovered assets, previously stolen by Blackburn. It was enough to expand the ranch considerably and establish a fund for the school. "Justice," Isaac said as they read the letter together on the porch of their expanded cabin. "Delayed but not denied. My father would be pleased," Scarlett said softly, leaning against his shoulder. "Not just about Blackburn, but about this about us." Isaac wrapped his arm around her, his hand resting gently on the slight swell of her belly where their first child was growing. "Our son will know about his grandfather," he promised. "The man he was, the principles he stood for," or daughter, Scarlett corrected with a smile. "Or daughter," Isaac agreed, kissing her temple. "Either way, a Lawrence Owens will be formidable." As the sun set over the Arizona landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Scarlett reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From fear and loss to love and new beginnings, from running away to finding home. No regrets, Isaac asked softly, as if reading her thoughts. Scarlett turned to him, seeing in his face everything she had ever needed. "None," she said. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." 5 years later, the Owens Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The small cabin had been replaced by a comfortable house with a wide wraparound porch. The school Scarlett had started now had its own building and a second teacher. 3 children now filled their home with laughter and energy, 2 boys and a girl, each with their mother's spirit and their father's steady nature. On the anniversary of their meeting that fateful day, when a desperate young woman had ridden into a stranger's yard with danger on her heels, Scarlett and Isaac stood together on their porch, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set behind the distant mountains. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" Scarlett asked, leaning against her husband's solid frame. "How close we came to never meeting at all." Isaac's arm tightened around her waist. "I prefer to think about how it's continuing," he said, the love in his voice as strong as it had been on their wedding day. "And how fortunate I am that you found your way to my door." Scarlett smiled, thinking of the frightened young woman she had been and the journey that had brought her home. "I told you he'd find me," she said, remembering her words on that first night. Isaac chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "And I told you he'd meet my rifle before he met you." "You kept your promise," Scarlett said softly. "You kept me safe." "Always will," Isaac replied, turning to face her. His eyes, still the color of a summer storm, held the same steadfast resolve they had shown that first day. "That's a promise I intend to keep for a lifetime." As the last rays of sun gilded the landscape in gold, Scarlett knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just safety, but the kind of love that legends were made of, born in danger, tested by adversity, and strengthened by shared purpose and mutual respect. In the wild and untamed Arizona territory, where life was often harsh and justice sometimes elusive, they had created something rare and precious. A home built on love, integrity, and the courage to stand against darkness. It was, Scarlett reflected as she kissed her husband in the fading light, the most valuable treasure of all.